Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host, and I'm always, virtually always so happy to be here on Monday and get started again. It's so nice to be back behind the microphone, so nice to be with you, but I have a special reason to be happy this Monday. We have one of the leading voices, really, in the Catholic intellectual life here in the United States and around the world, the biographer on two occasions of Saint Pope John Paul II, and the author of a brand new book, The Next Pope, The Office of Peter and the Church in Mission. If you have questions about the book, The Next Pope, and would like to talk to our guest, 888-318-7884 is the number. You probably guessed the name of our guest. George Weigel is a distinguished senior fellow of Washington's Ethics and Public Policy Center, where he holds the William E. Simon Chair in Catholic Studies. He's got a bunch of books on the New York Times bestseller list. I mentioned the two on the biographies of Pope St. John Paul II, Witness to Hope and The End and the Beginning. And he's one of the great Catholic books of recent times, Evangelical Catholicism. And he adds to that, as I said, a brand new book, The Next Pope, The Office of Peter and a Church in Mission. George Weigel, thank you very much for being with us.
Thanks, Cy. Good to be with you and good to be with your audience.
So I'm glad to hear that you have confidence that there will be a next pope, that this is not the end times, that we're not this is not it, this is not over. But what is your concern in the book, The Next Pope? What are you trying to communicate?
Well, I'm not sure it's not over, Cy.
Oh.
If we actually start playing Major League Baseball with a man on second base at the beginning of the 10th inning, God is not going to be amused here.
No,
and who
right.
knows what will happen.
It all comes down to baseball, huh?
Well, in any event, we pray thy kingdom come every day, right?
Yeah.
I have had a unique experience, I think, over the past 35 some years. I have personally known John Paul II, Benedict XVI, Pope Francis. I've been in extensive conversation with each of them. I've had, during that same period of time, a wide experience of Catholic life throughout the world. I've worked at 2 conclaves. I've worked at 3 synods. I have a wide range of contacts throughout the Catholic world on every continent. And it occurred to me earlier this year that privileged experience had created a debt. And I owed something for having been given the grace of that experience. And one way to pay down on that debt was to put all that experience together in a reflection on what the Church ought to have learned over the past 50 years, focused through the prism of the papacy, and the question, what would you want a pope to be? In the Church of the New Evangelization, what would you want a pope to be? So that's the reason for this book. It's short, it's not complicated, it doesn't have a lot of footnotes and endnotes and all that sort of business. It's a meditation on the Church's future through the prism of the papacy and through the experience that I've been privileged to have over the past 3.5 decades. That's what's good.
You make an interesting observation, and I was thinking about it today that I guess this isn't how you said it, but I think it's true that if, say, a man of the age of Pope John Paul II were elected Pope today, he'd have been born after the Second Vatican Council. So the way that you put it is you're likely to get somebody who was very young or even an infant or child during the council. That's a real shift. Everyone else, all these, even including Pope Francis, are already developed in the pre-Vatican II Church.
Yeah, the next pope will likely have been a teenager at the time of Vatican II, might even have been a child. John Paul II and Benedict XVI were significant figures at Vatican II. John Paul II as a bishop from Poland, Benedict XVI as a very influential conciliar theologian. Pope Francis was not at the council, but he was a Jesuit superior in the immediate post-conciliar years. He was instrumental in developing a document that North American Catholics need to know a bit more about, called the Aparecida document, which was a statement about the new evangelization from the bishops of Latin America and the Caribbean, which is one of the most impressive attempts or efforts to implement Vatican II properly that I've ever read. The next man, whoever he is just not going to bring that kit bag of experience to the job. He will be a genuinely post-conciliar pope. Now, as I indicate in the book, one of the things the next pope has to do is to continue the work of his predecessors in helping the church digest and implement the Second Vatican Council. In a little under 2 years, we will be at the 60th anniversary of the opening of Vatican II on October 11th, 1962. I venture to say that most Catholics who argue passionately about the Council one way or another have never read the documents of Vatican II. The next Pope ought to invite us to do that, beginning with the two great documents of the Council, the Dogmatic Constitution on the Church and the Dogmatic Constitution on Divine Revelation. So this next Pope, to say that this next Pope is a post-conciliar Pope, doesn't mean the Council's in the rearview mirror. It means that we need to look through the windshield through the prism of the Council properly understood.
George Weigel is our guest. His brand new book is called The Next Pope, The Office of Peter and a Church in Mission. Our number is 888-318-7884. If you have questions for George Weigel, 888-318-7884. It strikes me that there's in evangelical Catholicism, you really talked in there about the idea that we have to become a church that's, these will be my words, but I hope that they paraphrase accurately, that we got to get away from being quite so institutional and I guess institutional is the term. I don't have another word for it. And embrace this idea that of this charism that we have. Get out there and share Jesus. It seems to me that your description of the person of the next pope, if he's going to be the pope that we need, is a person who is disposed in such a way, who really believes in Jesus and really doesn't want to accomplish a bunch of other things except to share Jesus with the world.
That's right, Cy. This is a very Christocentric book.
Yeah.
It's a very Christocentric agenda for the church of the 21st century. The next pope's going to have a lot of house cleaning to do, and I discuss that in the book as well. But fundamentally, the pope is the church's first witness to the Lord Jesus. Remember how John Paul II began that inaugural homily on October 22nd, 1978. Everybody remembers the lines, "Be not afraid, open the doors to Christ." The opening line was, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." That was the first sentence spoken at his first public mass by John Paul II. That's what he thought a pope was. He's somebody who's a witness to the truth of God in Christ. So we certainly are looking for someone who radiates the joy of the gospel. We're also looking for someone who helps every Catholic understand that each of us was given a missionary commission on the day of our baptism. We all got the Great Commission of Matthew 28:19 on the day of our baptism. Everybody in the church has to think of themselves as a missionary called to offer others the gift we've each been given of friendship with the Lord Jesus and incorporation into his body, the church. That also means that we have to understand as I wrote in Evangelical Catholicism and repeat here, everywhere is mission territory. Mission territory is not places you read about in National Geographic. Mission territory is your kitchen table. It's your neighborhood. It's your workplace. It's your life as a citizen. It's your life as a consumer. It's all mission territory. And as you say, if we would get out there and be those missionary disciples, a lot of good things would happen. And in the places of the church that are living today, that's exactly what's going on.
888-318-7884, the number. George Weigel, our guest. The Next Pope, The Office of Peter and a Church in Mission is the name of George Weigel's brand new book. It's from Ignatius Press. Again, if you'd like to talk with George, we'll do that when we come back from the break. 888-318-7884. I do want to make something clear, though, George, before we go to the break, that this book is not a review of personalities who could be the next pope. This is a kind of job description, really. It seems like that's more what it is.
That's exactly right. It's a kind of agenda for the future. There is not a single discussion of any papal candidate or possible papal candidate. This is a book to reflect upon the future of the church. It's not a horse racing handicap sheet.
Again, 888-318-7884, the number. Callers on the line, but you can get in the queue and you can talk with George Weigel when we come back about his brand new book, The Next Pope, from Ignatius Press.
Catholic Answers Live.
Hi, this is Cy Kellett. Don't forget to check out the latest episode of our podcast, Catholic Answers Focus. You can listen each week to the world's premier podcast on Catholic apologetics at CatholicAnswersFocus.com or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Catholic Answers Focus, now available at CatholicAnswersFocus.com.
People always ask me, Father, how should we pray? Well, there's several ways we can do it, but the most important is through the power of the Holy Spirit. We have to pray from our heart. We have to pray honestly and sincerely. We have to allow the Holy Spirit to work through us so that we're not just simply saying words, but we're saying words that can actually change us. Prayer, if it changes us, then we're doing it right.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. George Weigel is our guest. Next hour, Carlo is going to be here. Carlo Broussard will be our guest, and our topic for the second hour will be Catholic answers to Protestant questions. So if you're a Protestant person and you'd like to ask something about the Catholic faith, you're welcome the second hour. Well, you're always welcome. You're welcome this hour as well. If you want to ask something about to George about the next pope, that's fine. But we'll focus on that second hour. 888-318-7884, the number. So since we said this is kind of a program for the future, the next pope, the new book from Ignatius Press, it's also kind of a job description. Tell us something about what this guy's got to be able to do. I mean, in some ways, it's a billion and a billion point eight or something Catholics. It just seems like an impossible job. Who is this guy got to be?
Yeah, 1.3 billion at the moment.
Okay.
It's a humanly impossible job. It's only possible by a man who conforms himself in a very special way to the grace of God at work in his life. I would say that the primary requisite for the next pope is to understand a fundamental fact about Christian life in the 21st century. And that is that Christian communities that maintain a strong sense of doctrinal and moral clarity can survive and even flourish under these very challenging cultural conditions we live in. Christian communities which aren't sure what they believe, aren't sure they know how we should live, that fudge the boundaries, are withering and in some cases dying. That's true across the Christian world. And frankly, it's true in the Catholic Church. I spent almost a week, just about a year ago, in Munich and the surrounding area of Bavaria. This is one of the two historic centers of Catholicism in Germany. It's, of course, home to Benedict XVI. The parish in which I was staying in Munich has 10,000 parishioners, which they measure by how many people pay this German church tax.
Right.
Tick the box on their tax form so that some money goes to the church. I asked the pastor, how many are at Mass on Sunday? 200.
Wow.
2%.
And this is before the pandemic.
And, you know, and so here is this massive institution, lavishly funded, very generous to the church in the third world, but it's absolutely moribund at home. Why has that happened? It's happened because of Catholic light. Catholic light is fudging the boundaries. Catholic light is a lack of confidence in the gospel. Catholic light is the notion that Jesus Christ is, you know, a moral exemplar, maybe a good teacher, but he's not the incarnate Son of God who reveals the truth about God and the truth about us. And Catholic light leads to Catholic zero. I mean, this is, thank you, Coca-Cola Company, for providing the template here. Catholic light leads to Catholic zero. Whereas, by contrast, if you look at the living parts of the church, sub-Saharan Africa, for example, the vibrant parts of the church in the United States, these are places that have embraced Catholicism in full and are getting about the business of being missionary disciples. So, the first requisite for any leader in the church today, local pastor, local bishop, lay evangelist, pope, is to understand this iron law of Christianity and modernity. You know, clarity works, confusion and lack of confidence lead to dying, frankly.
Yeah, right. I suppose there's been some of those who are there. There is a tremendous amount of criticism of the current Pope, Pope Francis, in the United States. It does seem to me that some of that is from people who are afraid that Catholic light is what the Pope is promoting. I don't want you to address that. I mean, if you want to, you can. But that's not what I'm. But I do think in this atmosphere of really, there's a great polarization among Catholics in the United States about the current Pope. Were you at all concerned with the title, the next Pope, that people would think that somehow you're trying to move on from Francis? You know, let's just get over Francis.
Yeah. Some people are going to think that. National Catholic Reporter was out the first day of the book, you know, lambasting me as usual. No surprise there. I wish they'd get a little more interesting in their attacks. These would get rather dull after a while. Pope Francis will be 84 in December.
Yeah.
It is no insult to him. He very kindly received me 3 times in private audiences. And we've done some headbanging in those audiences. I'm not going to get into the details because, unlike some other people I could name but won't, I don't think private audiences are things that you then run out and start tweeting about and putting Facebook posts.
Very old-fashioned view of the word private, George. Very old-fashioned view.
Yeah, well, you know, I try to be a churchman, not just a communicator. But it's no insult to him to say we need to be thinking about the future. I'm sure he's thinking about the future. But the church needs to think very seriously about what has, frankly, worked in terms of bringing people to Christ and expanding the fellowship of the church, and what hasn't over the past 50 years. And that's what I have tried to bring to bear. my analysis of the good news and the bad news of
Yep.
the past 50 years in this book. It's also the case that the next pope is going to have a very sturdy broom with him. Pope Francis has made some efforts to clean up the mess in the Vatican. Recently, he seems to be getting a bit more aggressive in dealing with financial issues. But there is an awful lot more that remains to be done. And there is a massive institutional, cultural shift that has to take place. And that's going to mean, candidly, getting rid of a lot of people. A very senior member of the College of Cardinals 2 years ago asked me, interestingly enough, what are we looking for in the next pope?
Uh-huh.
And I said to him, first of all, a man who radiates the joy of the gospel, faith in Jesus Christ, and can make Christian orthodoxy attractive to others. And I said, secondly, he's got to be willing to fire 50 people in the first month. Those are my two bottom lines.
That's
and
quite a combination.
I don't mean that flippantly. I have spent an awful lot of time in the Vatican since the early 1990s. I think I know its institutional culture pretty well. I had to deal with it, wrestle it into some form of submission to get Witness to Hope and The End and the Beginning, my John Paul II biography, done. I know the game. I know what's going on the financial side because Cardinal George Pell is my oldest friend in the world, and he and I talked regularly about what he was trying to do. So we need that man who radiates the joy of the gospel, and we need somebody who's willing to do a real house cleaning. He doesn't have to do that himself. He can hire a Cardinal Secretary of State or someone else to be the heavy. But we really need some cleanup, and that, I think, better happen sooner rather than later, because like all bureaucracies, the Vatican bureaucracy is very good at tying new people up in knots. So, you might as well get it done at the beginning and move on from there.
A whole bunch of folks on the line to talk with George Weigel, our guest. His brand new book is called The Next Pope, The Office of Peter and a Church in Mission. It's from Ignatius Press. Jerry in Buffalo, New York, will go to you first. Jerry's watching on Facebook Live. Thanks for calling, Jerry. Your question for George.
Yes. Hi. George, as a Catholic, how can I defend Pope John Paul II against a lot of the complaints from people that a lot of the abuse happened on his watch?
Well, first of all, thanks, Jerry, for calling. I have a soft spot in my heart for Buffalo. I became a great Buffalo Sabres fan when I was in graduate school in Toronto. So my best wishes to Buffalo. I don't like fried bologna. I will say that, but wings are great. I would say people need to look at the record. In the United States, the greatest amount of clerical sexual abuse of the young took place in a period from the late 60s to the late 1980s. In other words, once John Paul II's reform of the priesthood and the seminaries began to kick in, the incidence of these horrible crimes and sins really went down. The fundamental fact about John Paul II is that he was a great reformer of the priesthood. Equally true is the very strong role played by Cardinal Ratzinger in addressing these problems. I don't think anyone understood the magnitude of what had happened in the period from the late 60s to the mid-late 1980s until this dike broke in 2002. Now, in my memoir, Lessons in Hope, My Unexpected Life with St. John Paul II, I have a whole chapter on the Pope and the abuse crisis. It's very anecdotal. It describes in detail our personal conversations about that. I reproduce a long letter I sent to the Pope about what we had learned in the United States. So that might be something to look at as well. The bottom line is, when he understood the problem, he acted.
Jerry, thanks very much. I'm sorry if you feel slighted about the fried bologna thing, but thank you very much for the question. George Weigel is our guest. He has a brand new book, The Next Pope, and a whole bunch of folks on the line. So we'll get to more calls for George Weigel right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
When you need answers about the Catholic faith, you need to have someone to turn to whom you can trust. At Catholic Answers, we take that seriously. And at Catholic.com, you'll find the answers to thousands of your questions on all things Catholic, with an extensive library of audios, videos, tracks, articles, and more that gets larger every day. We've given the site a whole new look with better navigation than ever before, and lots of great new features to make your Catholic.com experience one that will have you coming back again and again. That's Catholic.com, with answers from the people you can trust at Catholic Answers. Visit us today.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. It's free, and you'll have instant access to our daily broadcast, the schedule of upcoming shows, and you'll even be able to search the archive and listen to thousands of past shows. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
How do we know Jesus founded a visible, organized church? Is today's Catholic Church the same as the Church of the Apostles and the early Christians? What can I say to someone who claims the medieval church became corrupted by pagan ideas and practices? In 20 Answers, The Church, you'll find smart, solid answers to these questions and many more, helping you to understand how the church Jesus founded is able to carry on through history his mission of teaching and sanctifying his followers. 20 Answers, The Church is part of the 20 Answers series from Catholic Answers, offering hard facts, powerful arguments, and clear explanations of the most important topics facing the church and the world. All in a compact, easy-to-read package. Visit shop.catholic.com today and take a look at this exciting new series from Catholic Answers Press.
I'm Gloria Purvis.
And I'm Deacon Harold. The Morning Glory team discusses what color was Jesus and does it matter?
Tomorrow morning, 7 Eastern. Now back to Catholic Answers Live.
Eight 888-318-7884 is our number if you'd like to talk with George Weigel about his brand new book, The Next Pope, from Ignatius of the Church. And so who would be the kind of person who would have the tools to lead that kind of church, the kind of church that, not a book in any way dismissive of the current Pope or the current Pope Emeritus or anything. It's not about that. It's about what is we would like to see and that the world needs. 888-318-7884 is the number if you'd like to call. Let's go now to Louise in Ohio, watching on Facebook Live. Hi, Louise. You there with us?
I am. Hi, how are you?
Very well. Thank you. You have a question for George Weigel?
I did. I just had a question. I just thought it was so beautifully put with having like a missionary stance no matter where you are. And I've always admired in my family, quite a few of my brothers-in-laws and sisters-in-laws have converted their spouses, and I've always been so amazed by that. I guess I was just kind of curious what you would recommend to be like a first step, like either a first book or just like a first physical movement. Like what would you recommend to start that missionary lifestyle? Because I'm very introverted that way, and I don't feel very confident, obviously. I would like to learn, but I don't know. I guess I would just like his input on. Yeah,
you're taking George's call seriously, and you'd like a little bit of help about, okay, I'm serious about this. I'm not an outgoing person. How do I get started as an evangelist?
I often recommend a choice among things to people, and thank you for that question. One is, if you are in a parish with a beautifully celebrated liturgy, with beautiful music and good preaching, nothing introduces people to Catholicism better than the Mass. I mean, this is the source and summit of Catholic life, as the Council teaches. So, invite people to brunch and then say, well, let's go to Mass first. Now, I stress the beautiful music and the good preaching, because this can be counterproductive in some instances. I think Bishop Barron's Catholicism series, those 10 DVDs, is the most impressive visual presentation of Catholic faith that's ever been done. I would invite people to just look at the first of them. They're so visually compelling. They're so beautifully done that I think people will want to see more. My own effort at this is a book called Letters to a Young Catholic, which is published by Basic Books. It takes people on a tour around the Catholic world. Obvious places, Rome, for example, Jerusalem, John Henry Newman's oratory in Birmingham, but, some off the beaten track places, the castle that was the model for Brideshead and Brideshead Revisited, Milledgeville, Georgia, Andalusia Farm, the home of Flannery O'Connor. And in each of these places, I explain a facet of the creed through the place, through the experience of the place. That's a more literary version of what Bishop Barron does in the Catholicism series. So those are three things that occur to me.
What do you think, Louise?
Oh, that sounds great. I love the actual, the different facets, definitely, because I have friends interested in different things. I'm very musical myself, so the liturgy and different things like that would be great. And then, to pull through somebody through literature, I think is a great idea as well.
Very good.
So it's not just preaching at them. I guess that's exactly what I needed to hear, because I just don't know. I don't want to be in someone's face, I guess, is what I'm.
No, people have to be invited into the experience, before you can catechize them. I mean, it's as simple as that. I mean, they have to have some sense that there's something attractive here that I don't have, and that I might like to experience, might like to be part of my life. Once that happens, then we can get into the catechesis properly. But evangelization is essentially a work of invitation. I have met Lord Jesus. Can I introduce you to him?
Thank you, Louise. Appreciate that call very much. George Weigel has a brand new book out. It's called The Next Pope. It doesn't name names. It's not that kind of book. It's about the kind of man needed for the office, and about the kind of church that office should be leading. The Next Pope, The Office of Peter and a Church in Mission. It's available now from Ignatius Press. You can call us here at 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. Do you ever think, George, I mean, in a certain sense, if you look over the last 100 years, probably, we've been kind of spoiled with the quality of popes. It seems like the quality of popes has been very high. What if we can't match that quality? What if the church is just not producing that quality of cardinal these days? I mean, is that just an ugly thought, or what do you think?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
I mean, I know perhaps a third to a half of the College of Cardinals. There are men that the popes of the 20th century were an outstanding group. And it's also true that holiness, faith, competence there. It's certainly true that the popes of the 20th century were an outstanding group. And it's also true that, the church has had some periods where the papacy has been in considerable disarray. I think there's upsides and downsides, frankly, to this run of really impressive popes. The upside is that, you can get stuff done fairly quickly. I mean, I remind people in this little book, The Next Pope, that Pius X reconfigured the entire spiritual landscape of Catholicism by one act, letting 7-year-olds receive Holy Communion.
Right.
The landscape changes instantly and comprehensively. Pius XII prepared the intellectual ground for the Second Vatican Council with 3 great encyclicals during the mid-1940s. John Paul II's role in the collapse of European communism is something that I've discussed in many books and articles. So this papal protagonism, as some people call it, can be a really positive thing. On the other hand, it sometimes functions as a safety valve for church leaders who don't want to do their duty. Whether that's a local bishop or the superior of religious community who, doesn't want to deal with a mess and says, Rome will deal with this.
Right.
That is irresponsible. And one of the things I make clear in The Next Pope, the book, is that the next pope, the guy, is going to have to call a halt to that and say, bishops, I'm here to support you and empower you, but I'm not here to run your diocese. If things are in disarray, you got to straighten it out. If a religious community is in a state of dissent, apostasy of some form or other, the Pope has to demand that be sorted out at the local level. So while it's great that there is this visible reference point that much of the world associates with the whole Catholic Church, I mean, the Pope is the Church. That is, first of all, not true. There's a whole lot of other stuff going on in the Church than what's going on in the Vatican. And it also becomes a kind of escape valve for irresponsible leadership, and that really has to be addressed.
What about the media savvy? I mean, Pope John Paul was kind of he was just a kind of a freakishly talented media personality. Do you think that matters? Or what if we had a Pope that was kind of averse to media?
I don't think it's the end of the world. I could imagine, for example, a Pope who really takes seriously the house cleaning job I talked about earlier.
Right.
Focuses on that, does it off camera. I think the papacy is probably too visible right now. There's a certain self-discipline involved in this. It can be, papal visibility can become a declining asset over time. And I suggest in the book that a review of Vatican communication strategy is a good idea. John Paul II was very effective in part because he wasn't on camera all the time. He kind of disciplined himself not to be always talking about so many things, and that's a good lesson to learn. I think the Pope who has been least well served by his press people in Rome is Benedict XVI. This was a brilliant teacher who's actually quite understandable. I mean, he is a genius and whatnot, but he's an understandable genius. And somehow the communications people in the Vatican did not let that come through. So the whole thing, I think, the whole communication strategy of the Holy See needs to be revisited. I will also say, and I discussed this a bit in the section on the next Pope and the bishops, that in choosing bishops, the Church has to choose men who are not media averse. You just cannot have a local bishop hiding from the local media. Now, as I said, with the Pope, he has to ration that. He can't be on air all the time. But a bishop who cannot explain why the church teaches what it does, why the church does what it does, why the church is taking the disciplinary actions it's taking when it has to take them, is not going to be a lot of use in an environment in which, unfortunately, most Catholics get their Catholic information from non-Catholic sources.
Again, George Weigel, our guest. The book is The Next Pope, The Office of Peter and a Church in Mission. It's available now from Ignatius Press. If you'd like to talk with George, we got still have some moments left. 888-318-7884, the number. That's 888-318-7884. Before I send you off into the break, I want to remind you, July is the month to make your subscription to Catholic Answers magazine, because you get all kinds of deals in July. Right now, our annual magazine drive is underway, and you can get a one-year subscription for 25% off the cover price. That's just $30 for a one-year subscription to the finest English language magazine of Catholic apologetics you will find anywhere. And then you also get a bunch of free stuff in there with it, like free digital subscriptions, free downloadable files with all the digital issues from the last 4 years. So $30 subscription, that's 25% off, and then all those additional things. But if you do a 2-year subscription, you get 40% off the cover price, and that is $50 for 2 years. And then you get, I think, 8 years of back issues available to you digitally. You get the whole free digital subscription. So head over to CatholicAnswersMagazine.com, CatholicAnswersMagazine.com, and pick up your subscription at considerable savings right now in the month of July.
Call now, Catholic Answers Live.
On the next Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo.
We do our very best at Catholic Connection to keep you connected to the Church with interviews on issues that matter, issues that impact our everyday lives as Catholics in the world, but not of the world. Whether it's featuring the latest from the front lines of the pro-life movement or the culture war that continues to rage around us, we will give you the tools to help you stay faithful as well as make a difference.
Catholic Connection, weekday mornings at 9 a.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Magnificat. Published monthly, Magnificat features daily Mass, prayers, articles, and meditations in step with the liturgical rhythm of the Church. On the web at magnificat.com.
You've heard that St. Paul Street Evangelization supports hundreds of teams of evangelists sharing the good news. But did you know that some of these teams are public prayer stations? Set up a sign on the sidewalk and offer prayer and encouragement to those you encounter. Everyone needs prayer. Try this new method of witnessing to Jesus. Contact St. Paul Street Evangelization to get started at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Coming up next, Carlo Broussard will be here the second hour. We're going to do Catholic Answers to Protestant Questions. If you're a Catholic, you can call. If you're a Protestant, you can call. If you don't believe in God, you can call. If you're an Earthling, you can call. If you're from another planet, you can call 888-318-7884. This hour, we're talking with George Weigel, the author of a brand new book, author of many books, including 2 biographies and a personal, also, in addition to the 2 biographies, a personal recollection of his own relationship with Saint Pope John Paul II. He also wrote the book Evangelical Catholicism, and this is his latest book from Ignatius Press, The Next Pope, The Office of Peter and a Church in Mission. Our number, if you'd like to speak with George, 888-318-7884. You know, I had forgotten, and you were just mentioning at the break, you're usually overseas at this time of the year. Will your seminars that you run in Krakow, Poland happen this year, or are they not happening?
We couldn't do it. I mean, we couldn't do it right, and we weren't going to do it half right, so we just suspended it for a year. People who might be interested in this, it's a kind of crash course in Catholic social doctrine, can go to the website of my center, the Ethics and Public Policy Center, eppc.org, and there's a tab called A Taste of TMS, the Tertio Millennium Seminar. And we've been posting little half-hour videos that my faculty and I have made, introducing people to some of the things we talk about in Krakow as a way to keep this going. But yeah, no, I've been home since mid-March. It's
weird.
It's been a very strange period, but thank God for these kind of opportunities to get out and meet people.
I don't want to wander off topic, but since you know that this part of the world, it does seem like in Poland and in other parts of Eastern Europe, there's a real hopeful vision of the Catholic Church, a real hopeful vision of civic life that's drawn on the Christian faith. Maybe you'd say something about that. I'll go back to callers. I promise you callers, but I feel like that's something where maybe American Catholics are not quite aware of this, or if they are, they get the kind of CNN version, which is all these crazy right-wingers
It's a complicated picture. I think there is still a great reservoir of Catholic faith in Poland in particular. I have had 2 visits to Poland canceled because of the pandemic. Actually 3. One coming up in November was just canceled too. And I was going to say during the John Paul II centenary celebrations that I thought it was time for Poland to stop looking through the rearview mirror at past and to start looking out the windshield through the eyes of John Paul II. I think it's probably true that whether we're talking about John Paul's social doctrine or something like the theology of the body, John Paul II has been more thoroughly received in the church in the United States than in Poland. And I've discussed this with leaders of the Polish church. They don't disagree with me. They say they're still too emotionally caught up in John Paul II. To which I respond, well, look, you guys have got to actually internalize this extraordinary body of teaching, or in 40 years or 30 years, you might look like Italy. I don't think Poland's going to become Ireland, which is a total disaster.
Right.
But it might become Italy, where there's still this visible Catholic culture, but it's not as alive as it should be. It's not forming public life the way it should be. So I regret that I wasn't able to be in Poland and try to advance that line of argument this year, but I will try to do it.
Actually, I got to say, I'm glad I asked you about it because I'm truly surprised by the answer. That's very interesting to hear that. I appreciate your candor in that regard. I did promise the callers I'd go back to them, however, so let's go to Joyce in Columbus, Ohio, listening on St. Gabriel Radio. Joyce, your question for George Weigel.
I love Mr. Weigel, and I was just wondering, because I love Pope Benedict XVI, I was wondering if you would maybe do a book on him and what he's done for the church.
Well, thank you. Thanks for that. Thanks for the call. Thanks for the suggestion. When Pope Benedict was elected, I wrote a book called God's Choice, Benedict XVI and the Future of the Catholic Church. That includes, among other things, a mini biography of him. I've also written a number of articles about him over the years of his pontificate. And then this past October, I had the pleasure of a 45-minute long conversation with him when I was in Rome for the Synod on Amazonia. It was a wonderfully robust conversation. He was very frail physically, but totally lucid. And on top of things in the United States in a way that suggested to me that he's really still paying close attention to the church around the world. So I think I'll leave the Benedict biographies to others. Peter Sewald has got a major biography either coming out or just out. But I'm actually in touch with Benedict and his secretary on a fairly regular basis. So that conversation happily continues.
Joyce, I imagine you've read Sewald's interview books with Pope Benedict, being a fan of his.
I've read a lot of things about that, but I'm not sure if I've gotten that one or not.
Yeah. Well, what I always found about Pope Benedict is you'd be amazed at the things he'd say in an interview. You'd think, well, he's no leader of the church is good. He's very comfortable saying quite forthright things. I always admired that about Pope Benedict. Joyce, I'm going to say thanks for the call. I want to try to get as many on with George Weigel as I can. Frank in Pennsylvania is up next. Frank, are you there with us?
Yes, I am.
Hi, Frank. Got a question for George Weigel?
Yes. Back in 1976, as a cardinal, John Paul II visited America, and he made that prophetic warning that mankind was about to undertake the greatest battle, the battle between the church and the anti-church. And he said it would be over family and the marriage. My question is, he wanted everybody to be aware of that this was coming. And he also said he wanted everybody to be engaged. So why aren't we hearing that from the pulpit more? Because clearly we can see this battle is being taken. I mean, all you got to do is put on the radio or TV. That battle is being fought today against the family and the church. So why isn't that being, told that this has to be engaged by everybody? We all have to be involved.
All right. George?
I think it's even, the situation is more disturbing than in 1976. The Bostock decision by the Supreme Court a couple of weeks ago essentially put an anti-biblical view of the human person into American civil rights law. This is really bad. Not only can you not have a democracy when man, woman, gender mean anything we just want them to mean. You can't have a civilization that way. I mean, this denial of fundamental reality is deeply, deeply problematic. Now, John Paul II not only gave us warnings, he gave us tools to address these problems. I have a whole section in this book, The Next Pope, on the next pope and the crisis of Christian humanism. The world is in deep trouble because of false ideas of the human person. Our country is in deep trouble because of that. The notion that we are all simply twitching bundles of desires, and that the satisfaction of those desires is the full meaning of human rights or civil rights, is a really infantile notion of the human person. And it's an infantile notion of freedom, and we're suffering from it. The church has a much nobler view of the human person. Church says we are made in the image and likeness of a creator who endowed us with the capacity to know the good and to choose the good, and if necessary, to suffer for the good. And that creator entered his creation in the person of his Son, incarnate as Jesus of Nazareth, to give us a model of the human person fully alive, which we received on Easter Sunday. Jesus reveals both the face of the merciful Father and the truth about our humanity, its origin, and its ultimate destiny. That's a lot more compelling a view of what a human being is than this garbage that surrounds us in the culture today. And as you suggest, we need to hear a little bit more of that from the pulpit. We've got a message of human nobility to bring into a world that is dying from debased notions of what a human being is.
Thank you so much, Frank, for that question. I appreciate you bringing us to the end of the show with that very profound question, eliciting that response from George Weigel. George Weigel has been our guest. His book, the newest book, is called The Next Pope, The Office of Peter and a Church in Mission. It's a job description for the next pope, but it's a job description for us, too, as Catholics, in a sense, letting us know what it is, or reminding us what the Catholic Church is and what it needs to be for the good of all on this earth. George Weigel, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to spend an hour with you.
Thanks, Simon. Great to be with you and with your guests.
All right, coming up next, Carlo Broussard. It's going to be Catholic Answers to Protestant Questions. If you are one of our Protestant brothers and sisters, Carlo would love to talk with you. If you're a Catholic who's got a challenge for us from a Protestant friend. You're welcome as well. Right back with that. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. It was a lot of fun getting to talk with George Weigel about his brand new book, The Next Pope. But now I'm ready to, just party with the Cajun himself. Carlo Broussard, apologist here at Catholic Answers, author, speaker extraordinaire. His latest book is The Protestant Challenge.
Meeting the Protestant Challenge.
The Protestant Challenge.
That's a key word there, man. That's a key verb there, meeting.
Hello, Carlo.
Hello, Si.
It's nice to see you again.
It's great to see you. When you said party with the Cajun, I almost started singing, whoa, it's party time.
Oh, look at that. When Carlo sings, it's not so bad. Some of these guys, don't be in here when Trent gets the idea that he's going to give you a rendition. Oh, you just don't want to be here.
Don't want to be here?
No. All right, so this hour, we're going to do Catholic answers to Protestant questions.
Sure.
And what are some of those Protestant questions? I mean, where's purgatory in the Bible is the one that always comes up. But.
Sure. Yep. That ranks number one of all the questions that we get here when we do these sorts of shows and online. It's the number one topic researched. It could take the form of where is that in the Bible, right? That's a common question. Pope, saints, Mary, purgatory, etc. Why you call men father, etc. Or it could take the form of, like I propose in my book, the form of how can the church teach X when the Bible says Y. So maybe there's a specific Bible passage that you think shows a particular Catholic belief to be false. So the Protestant question could take that form, right? Sometimes Protestants just have a general inquiry about what the church teaches and just seeking clarification on something. Maybe they've heard from their pastor that Catholics worship Mary, but they talk to Catholics who say, no, we don't, right? And so it could be simply a question of clarification, right?
Yeah.
So it could, the Protestant question could take on a variety of forms. And so whether there's a Protestant out there who has one of these types of questions and they'd like to call in and have a nice little chat, we'd love to have them. And maybe our Catholic brothers and sisters out there are dialoguing with their Protestant friends, and maybe they got stumped with a question from their Protestant friend that they want some help on how to answer in order to share with their friend. They can give us a call. So we'd love to have them.
888-318-7884, the number 888-318-7884. Catholic answers to Protestant questions. I mean, we've had 500 years. We both have had 500 years to work on our materials. So Protestants have answers when Catholics have a question for them, and Catholics have answers when Protestants have a question. I mean, it's up to the person to evaluate which are the most reasonable, but we do have answers for each other, and we'd love to share that conversation with you.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because there's another type of Protestant challenge or question that often arises, and that is, over the 500 years, in the dialogue, in the conversations, Catholics have put forward certain biblical texts that we see as supporting certain beliefs that we have.
Yeah.
But our Protestant friends have some pretty savvy comebacks.
Yes, right,
They have some pretty good counters to those positive arguments that we as Catholics put forward. So, for example, maybe we might say Matthew 16:18, Peter is the rock. And so our Protestant friends counter and say, oh, no, it's not Peter, it's Jesus. Or it's not Peter, it's his confession of faith.
Right.
And here are the reasons why X, Y, Z. Another example could be in John 20:23. Catholics put forward the argument, well, there's Jesus telling the apostles, whosoever sins you forgive, they are forgiven. Whosoever sins you retain, they are retained. Sacrament of confession, right?
Right.
And our Protestant,
Put the brakes on, yeah.
Our Protestant friends will counter and say, well, wait a minute. No, Luke 24:47, Jesus gives the instruction to preach the forgiveness of sins. And so we need to read the command to forgive sins in light of the command to preach the forgiveness of sins. And that's all that Jesus is saying. So you see how yet again, another type of question that we could get from our Protestant friends. And so it's sort of a part two of apologetics, right? We as Catholics have to be ready to counter the counter.
Yeah, 888-318-7884, the number 888-318-7884. The only one that bothers me is the objection that comes, it seems to me, in bad faith sometimes, where a person will say, you do this when we know we don't. do that. And sometimes I think, like, for example, the Catholics do this to Protestants too, as well. But I'll just say it as a sensitive.
We straw man each other all the time.
Where you say, well, this is what you teach, and you go, no one ever taught me that in the Catholic Church. That's never been what we teach.
Yeah.
And then, but the person, I just think that it's bad faith sometimes to do that. But,
well, I'm a bit more sympathetic because in my experience, many Protestants just have a false conception of what we teach based upon what their pastor has told them or what they heard on TV or the internet. And some people haven't rolled up their sleeves and done the work themselves to inquire as to whether what they're hearing matches up with what the church actually teaches. Yeah. So they're just going based upon the authority from which they got the information, and thus they come to you in conversation and say, hey, you believe this. And they might even be emotionally charged in making that assertion, right?
Right.
And so our job as Catholics is to take a step back and relax and ask the question, okay, well, they're emotionally charged because they think we're teaching something contrary to the truth.
Like if you think I worship a statue, you should be emotionally charged.
That's right.
That's fair enough.
And that's a legitimate emotional, it's righteous emotional flaring, I guess you could call it, right? Yeah. But then we have to ask, well, why do they think that, right? And what is the source from which they got that information? And so, like, the reasoning is correct, right? I should reject all forms of idolatry. Catholics are guilty of idolatry. Therefore, I should reject Catholicism, right?
Yeah,
that's
a good
valid
point.
That's a valid line of argumentation. Of course, we would challenge the premise, number two, that Catholics are guilty of idolatry. And so that's where we need to emphasize and focus in on and drill in on, right?
Yep.
And that's where the debate lies, and try to bring the conversation to that particular issue and say, hey, this is what the real problem is. And so let's talk about it.
888-318-7884, 888-31-TRUTH, our number. Whether you're Catholic or Protestant or other, you are welcome to call 888-318-7884. Carlo Broussard, our guest. Carlo is apologist here at Catholic Answers and author and speaker. But for some reason, he's given up public speaking. He just doesn't go out on the road and public speak anymore.
I have not.
That
is COVID-19's fault, man. But for those parishes who are open and are willing to bring in speakers, they can go to CatholicAnswersSpeakers.com and they get all the information on how to book me, because I am open, willing, and ready to rock and roll. In fact, a few parishes have booked me for this upcoming fall. In October, going to Oregon, as well as in December, going back home, baby, to Louisiana.
Louisiana, very
That's
good.
Right.
I hope it works out.
I know. Hopefully, nothing. You know, it doesn't all shut down again.
See, the president of Catholic Answers just walked in the studio, and I have a brilliant idea.
What's that?
I don't think that he takes this seriously. Robots. We should get a Carlo robot and a Tim robot and a Jimmy robot, and if you can't go, we just send the robot out.
Well, I got something even better. How about if the parish is shut down and they want to still have me teach their parishioners, we can do it virtually. We can use robots, computers, in order to have us there teaching virtually. But that's only if they're shutting down. Because I want to go and see those people face to face, man.
I wanted to see the Carlo robot, though. Like, I wanted to see the actual... Yeah, we can do that virtual stuff. I mean, we're
give
doing
us a
that
call.
with...
We'll figure it out. We'll set it up.
Later this month, Tim and I are going to Perth, Australia.
Really?
But it's virtual. We're doing a conference with... Do you see what I'm saying?
I totally bought it. Hook, line, and sinker,
because I'm not
getting
on an airplane to breathe everybody else's air to go to Perth, Australia. I probably would if Michael it's always Michael Chong that invites us. And
that's awesome, man.
But it's nice because we'll be able to do a thing with a whole group of people about God the Father, who loves us, by the way. We so often forget about God the Father. But we're going to do that with folks in Perth, Australia. The only thing is, I can't go to Amore Mio Pizza, the best pizza place on planet Earth. We got a bunch of calls for Carlo. I have to take a quick break. We will get to those calls, 888-318-7884. Catholic Answers to Protestant Questions this hour on Catholic Answers Live.
Call us now with your question on Catholic Answers Live.
What does the sacrament of confirmation do? Is there any such thing as Catholic economics? These are the kinds of questions we ask on our free podcast, Catholic Answers Focus, and you should be a subscriber. In fact, we tackle both of these questions this week. On Monday's episode, Father Hugh Barber explains the sacrament of confirmation as you've never heard it explained before. And on Wednesday, I get to interview Trent Horn on Catholic economics. Find these episodes and tons of other episodes at CatholicAnswersFocus.com or listen to Catholic Answers Focus wherever you get your podcasts.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
Homeschool Connections, an online provider of courses for your Catholic homeschool, is a sponsor of Catholic Answers Live. Homeschool Connections website is homeschoolconnections.com.
The leading Catholic voices are on EWTN Radio.
We talk to audiences all over the world. One thing I found out is everybody in the whole world has the same set of questions. They live the same human life. They all want meaning, they all want love, they all want significance, they want forgiveness. That's the most fascinating thing to me. The same answers work wherever you are throughout the world because we're all children of God.
Call to Communion with Dr. David Anders, tonight, 11 Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Hey, we still have a wonderful free MP3 for you. We just want to give it to you. We want you to have it. It's called Understanding Revelation. It's all about understanding what is maybe the most difficult book in the Bible to understand. You can get it at shop.catholic.com. The MP3 is free. Just download it onto your thing or listen to it there. And it's Jimmy Akin. I mean, it's Jimmy Akin on the Book of Revelation for free. I don't even know why I have to say anything more than that. Go to shop.catholic.com and find it. 888-318-7884, our number. Carlo Broussard is our guest, and we're talking about Catholic answers to Protestant questions this hour. We'll start here in Fremont, California, watching on Catholic.com. Joseph, your question for Carlo.
Hi, I'm glad to be on the show.
Thank you.
I'm not officially a Protestant anymore. I came back to the Catholic Church about 3 weeks ago.
Hey, well, welcome back.
Wow, Joseph, that's amazing, brother.
Thank you. I'm glad to be back.
Praise God.
And I'm
man.
100% Catholic now, so there won't be any more losing. But one of the reasons that I left, one of the big reasons, was I was very angry over our tolerating some Catholic, I don't want to mention their names,
Sure.
Catholic politicians.
Thank you for that, by the way.
Huh?
I said thank you for that. Yes, Catholic politicians who are pro-abortion. Sorry, continue.
Who are pro-abortion. And one of them I know is still taking communion.
Right.
And it really made me angry that she would, that person would do that.
Mm-hmm.
I did a little research on this, and I looked up the word heresy. And the definition I found, now you tell me if this is a good definition or not. Belief or opinion contrary to Orthodox religious, especially Christian doctrine.
Okay.
If that's a good definition of heresy, the church is pro-life.
Right.
They have a belief and opinion that's contrary to Orthodox religious, especially Christian doctrine. So doesn't that make them heretics by that definition?
All right. The Catechism of the Catholic Church defines heresy in paragraph 2089 as the obstinate post-baptismal, so this is applying only to those who have been baptized, denial of some truth which must be believed with divine and Catholic faith, or it is likewise an obstinate doubt concerning the same. So if you have a teaching of the Church that has been put forth infallibly, and that it is declared to be a part of divine revelation, and anyone who obstinately opposes and rejects such a truth, or has obstinate doubt concerning such a truth, that would be classified as heresy, okay? Now, the label of heretic we have to be careful as we throw that around, because some people actually can be guilty of material heresy, right? Where you have where you hold in a permanent way something contrary to an infallible teaching of the church, but there are some cases where you wouldn't be formally classified as a heretic. So we have to be careful when we throw the label of heretic around, while at the same time we can acknowledge what is heresy. Now, concerning whether or not, concerning those who hold to what we would classify as heresy, and those politicians who are public figures who are publicly promoting things that contradict God's revelation, and even what we can know by the natural light of human reason, in principle, Joseph, we can say that they ought not to present themselves to Holy Communion, lest they incur judgment upon themselves, in light of what St. Paul teaches in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 27 through 29, okay? But as to whether a bishop or a priest is to prudentially judge whether this person or that person meets those criteria, and in which circumstances, well, that's where it gets a little bit murky, Joseph, and more difficult for us as laity to make judgments of whether or not a priest or a bishop has made the right prudential decision. Okay, so we can articulate the principles of the matter, but whether those principles apply to this person in this circumstance, sometimes it's pretty evident, right? And we can make a reasonable judgment and say, well, it seems on the surface maybe the bishop or the priest should be stronger and forbid this person, like they ought to be forbidding.
Yes.
But we have to be very careful on judging the reasons why the bishop or the priest would not forbid them. I mean, granted, they might have some justifiable reason in their mind that we don't have access to, but on the surface it seems they ought to, and they're not. But for whatever reason why they're not, we have to leave that to God, right? And whether they're going to be culpable or not for the decision they make to not forbid communion to a politician who's publicly denying the faith, that's something we just have to leave to God, and to pray for those bishops and priests, and hopefully that they respond to the graces that God is giving them to be strong in whatever way God calls them to be.
Joseph, welcome home. We're delighted to have you. Thank you so much for the call. Today's hour with Carlo is Catholic Answers to Protestant Questions. If you're a Protestant person and you've always thought, man, I wish I could get a Catholic to explain that to me, or I'd really like to challenge a Catholic on that, you're welcome to call 888-318-7884. And if you're a Catholic person who'd like some help answering a challenge that you have encountered, 888-318-7884. Up next is Will in Memphis, Tennessee, watching on YouTube Live. Will, your question for Carlo.
I got into a conversation with a Catholic friend of mine the other day, and we're kind of going back a little bit on a few things. But one of the things that I was really interested in, I guess you would say, is we were talking about the papacy and the magisterium, and generally the different offices of the church. And I asked a question about, at certain points in history, we see where different members of, different offices of the church were either, selling different offices or, taking concubines, that sort of thing. And so my big question to him was, how can we, know, I guess, for sure, and say for sure that the church was, or the Catholic Church wasn't compromised in some manner because of that sort of corruption.
Okay.
All right. So, Will, just to get clarification, corruption relative to what? Like corruption relative to teaching, or corruption relative to a particular,
like having children out of
bit-
wedlock or something like
yeah,
that? Or?
yeah. I'm a bit unclear as to precisely which aspect of the church we find corruption in.
Sure. Well, I would say primarily, obviously within, the moral teachings of the church, but also I would think within, the doctrinal teachings as well, at least to some degree, when you have, bishops selling, the office of the priest or what have you.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, thank you so much, brother, for your question. Okay. So let's just take that example as, something to analyze and reflect upon. Maybe a bishop sells the office of the priesthood, right? And in order for you to become a priest, you got to give me some money. All right. Let's just say that's an example. Well, that would definitely be immoral and wrong, as we both agree, right? But it wouldn't necessarily preclude the validity of ordination, right? Because if the priest, assuming, and this might be an extraordinary circumstance, but let's just say the priest is intending to receive ordination, it's not like a mock ordination, and the bishop is intending to ordain, right? The immorality involved in that ordination would be accidental, like on this, it wouldn't be essential to the ordination itself, right? So it's something on the periphery, right? It's immoral, but if the bishop is pronouncing the right words in the rite of ordination, and the intention is there, and he's intending to do what the church is doing, it would be a valid ordination, although in this particular circumstance, there would be immorality involved.
Yeah.
Okay. So that would be my first thought concerning that specifically, Will, that there are times when immorality is involved in ordinations and the communication of hierarchical roles in the church. But on condition that the right form, the right matter, and the intention is there, the right form and matter is being used, and intention is there, we can conclude that it's valid holy orders, right, in that particular instance. Now, with regard to teachings, Will, concerning faith or morals, we have to ask the question when we're researching whether there has been corruption in the church's teaching. We have to ask the question first and foremost, is this an infallible teaching of the church? So what you will not find in church history is a teaching that has been put forth in an infallible way, something that has been put forth definitively true and thus unchanging. You will not find some other pope or some church council later in history trying to put forth in a definitive way some truth contrary to the infallible truth, okay? God will not allow that to happen. Now, is it possible that you have a pope or an ecumenical council that presents something in a non-definitive way? So it's not putting it forward as definitive truth. It's mentioning it in passing. Maybe in the case of a pope, it's in his ordinary magisterium. He's giving a homily, right? Or even in an encyclical. And he presents a teaching, but in a non-definitive manner, right? Then it's possible, theoretically, in that case, that such a teaching could indeed contradict a past infallibly taught truth, right? Because the gift of infallibility will only applies to those teachings, whether on faith or morals, that the church puts forth in a definitive manner. Outside of those bounds, and of course binding the universal church to believe it under the pain of the guilt of mortal sin. Outside of those boundaries, the gift of infallibility doesn't apply. So technically, in principle, it's possible for there to be some corruption in teaching. But remember, once again, this is only outside of the boundaries of infallible teaching of the magisterium. And so once we have those parameters in mind, well, then we can begin going through church history and teachings, etc. And you might find, oh, that contradicts infallible teaching. But you're going to discover that wasn't put forth in a definitive manner. I'm thinking of Pope John the 22nd, right, in the 14th century. when he taught that those who die don't immediately, if when they die, they don't, the faithful departed, if they're not in purgatory, don't enjoy the beatific vision until at the end of time in the final judgment, right? But I think it was Benedict the 12th and Benedictus Deus infallibly defined that no, those who die, if they die and whether they go through a final purification and it's complete or immediately, they enter into the beatific vision and don't have to wait until the end of time in order to enter into the beatific vision. So that's one example where you're going to find a teaching of the Pope that's not right, but then it's clarified and infallibly defined.
Will, thanks very much for the call. 888-318-7884, our number. Carla Broussard, our guest. Catholic Answers to Protestant Questions this hour. If you're a Protestant person, you're welcome to call. If you're a Catholic person, you're welcome to call. If you'd just like to hear the Catholic answer to a Protestant question, this is your hour. 888-318-7884.
Let us help you with your question today on Catholic Answers Live.
Looking for the best in solid Catholic resources that can answer your questions on all things Catholic? Looking for books, audio, and DVDs by the top thinkers and speakers on the planet today? Stop in today and visit the shop at Catholic.com. All of our resources are time-tested, apologist-vetted, and trustworthy and faithful to the teachings of the Catholic Church. There's no better source for solid Catholic resources anywhere on the internet. When you're shopping for good Catholic books, CDs, DVDs, and more, turn to someone you can trust. Visit the shop at Catholic.com today. That's shop.Catholic.com.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
Many Catholics ignore the Bible. They say they have the church instead. But we should embrace sacred scripture, not just as the revealed Word of God, but as a Catholic work, intimately connected with the church from the earliest centuries. In The Bible is a Catholic Book, apologist Jimmy Akin shows how the Bible cannot exist apart from the church, in its origins, in the truths it contains, in its careful preservation over the centuries. Scripture is inseparable from the Catholic faith. This is fitting, since both come from God for our salvation. If you're a Catholic who sometimes gets intimidated by the Bible is a Catholic Book will help you better understand and take pride in this gift that God gave the world through the Church. After all, Catholics are the original Bible Christians. Order your copy of The Bible is a Catholic Book today by calling 1-844-239-4952, visiting shop.Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
I'm Gloria Purvis.
And I'm Deacon Harold. The Morning Glory team discusses what color was Jesus and does it matter?
Tomorrow morning, 7 Eastern. Now back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Carla Broussard is our guest, and we're talking about Catholic answers to Protestant questions. It's kind of the meat and potatoes of what we do here at Catholic Answers. For as long as there has been a Catholic Answers, it has been a part of this apostolate to try to give a Catholic response to Protestant questions, and in some cases, Protestant objections. And if you have one of those, you're welcome to call 888-318-7884, 888-31-TRUTH. Let's go to John in Texas, listening on the EWTN app. John, you there with us?
Yes. I was wondering, how do you explain to a Protestant that they are saying the same exact thing you are, but they want to only accept their version of the answer?
Well, that's an interesting question, John. It's a bit difficult to answer because it's quite general and vague. Do you have a specific example in mind, like maybe a conversation you had?
I do.
Okay.
My stepfather, well, I am the only Catholic left in my family. Okay. Out of my two brothers, my sister, my mother, and my stepfather, on the way back to my house, it lasted maybe about 10 minutes or plus. He wanted to only say that he believes that there is not a Trinity, that he only believes that it's just one, as in that God is all three. And I told him that's the Trinity, and he said, no, I only believe it's just one. And he wouldn't accept the fact that he was saying the same thing that I was.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So when it comes to the Trinity, John, this is a tricky one because there's so much depth of the mystery there. So we would have to inquire and ask some questions and say, okay, well, when you say there's only one, what do you mean, right? Are you saying that there's only one person so that Jesus is the same person as the Father? Or are you saying that there's only one God? That is to say, one divine essence, infinite reality, infinite intellect, infinite will, supreme being itself, right? If the former, if you're saying that Jesus is the Father, well then, John, you would articulate your disagreement as a Christian. You would say, well, that's not Christian teaching. For example, in John chapter 17, Jesus prays to the Father, right? And asks that his apostles be one as he and the Father are one. Well, clearly Jesus is not talking to himself. He's talking to a distinct person other than himself, right? And that would be one piece of evidence among many to show that Jesus is not the Father. In relation to each other, they are distinct. Now, if he means that they are one in as much as they are identical to the same divine essence, which is the same divine reality. So they're equal in being, they're equal in their reality as God, they're equal and identical to the infinite intellect and the infinite will, right? Well, then we can agree and say, okay, well, if that's what you mean by saying there's only one God, we agree. That's called monotheism. And that's what the Bible teaches, and that's what we can even know by philosophy without the Bible. And so notice, John, that it's difficult because many times people just say things generally speaking, and it requires some questions, right, to probe a bit further to see exactly what they mean when they say what they say, right? And so those would be a couple of examples of some questions that you could ask in conversation in order to get behind what's being said so you know what's the target, right? You got to know your target before you can shoot your arrows at it. And so it's a matter of just inquiring a bit further. So what do you think of that, John? Is that helpful to you?
Well, what I did was I did explain to him that they all it's three as in one spirit through the whole, as in within the Holy Spirit, that are three together in one spirit. And he just kept saying, well, I believe they're all just God. And that's all he kept saying.
Okay, well, if he's saying all three are God, that is correct. And we recognize, John, keep this in mind, all three are one in as much as they are God, okay? But all three are distinct relative to each other. So remember, John, the Holy Spirit, he is not the Father nor the Son. He is not the Father or the Son. I should say he is neither the Father nor the Son, to be correct grammatically, right? but the Father is not the Son is not the Father, the Holy Spirit's not the Father and the Son. So notice the three persons are distinct, but they're one in as much as they are one God. So whether your friend is affirming that, it would just simply require a little bit more details in the conversation there.
Keep digging until you can find out what it is that the other person is actually saying, John. Thank you very much for the call. Carlo Broussard, I did okay saying keep digging?
Yes, you did. And you know where's a resource where he can keep digging? I wanted to mention this. I forgot. It slipped my mind. There's a great popular presentation of the Trinity, probably one of the best out there, in fact, by Frank Sheed in his book, Theology and Sanity. Now, of course, he has an even a more simplified version in his book, Theology for Beginners. But then a little bit more in depth is Theology and Sanity. And that's perhaps one of the best presentations of the Trinity out there on a popular level. There's also a popular book on the Trinity. I think it's called An Introduction to the Trinity by Father Gilles Emery, a Dominican priest, who wrote sort of the go-to book on the scholarly level for Trinitarian theology. But
so I'll read the Frank Sheed one. Ashley in Sioux City, Iowa, listening on 88.1 FM. You are up next. Ashley, your question for Carlo.
Hi, yes, thank you so much. So my sister and I were both raised Catholic, and I'm the godmother of her daughters. And her daughter is going to be making her first communion next year. However, my sister kind of has one foot in the Lutheran Church and one foot still kind of in the Catholic Church. She pretty much has been attending the Lutheran Church. And so I guess my question is just how to bring her back. Like, I want her daughter to have the true First Communion.
Right.
And so maybe just some guidance on, I think she has the idea that it's so close that what's the difference between Lutheran and Catholic. So, like, as far as the Eucharist,
Right.
the First Communion, thing.
Okay. Ashley, great question, and thank you so much for calling in, and hopefully we can help you out here. Okay, so one thought that comes to mind is you could ask your sister, and I think I remember that correctly, your sister, right?
Right.
Yeah, okay. You could ask your sister and say, well, why are you attending the Lutheran Church and not the Catholic Church? Because if you think there's really no difference between the two, then why not just keep going to the Catholic Church? You could inquire in that manner. And what that might do, Ashley, is prod her to reveal the reasons why she's being attracted to the Lutheran Church, right? As opposed to the Catholic Church. And whatever reason she gives for going to the Lutheran Church, then you can begin the conversation and direct the conversation toward those reasons. Let me ask you this, Ashley, has she stated any reasons why she prefers the Lutheran Church over the Catholic Church?
Just a couple things. When her girls were young, she just liked how the Lutheran Church had daycare, so then she felt like she could focus more during church.
Okay.
And then I think just kind of, I don't know, just even a generalized, just feel good, like it's like a feel good thing, like
Sure.
just not a.
Right.
I feel like she just has the knockoff brand and
Yeah.
is content with that.
Right. Okay. Well, you could begin to share with her and say, there are essential differences between the two. On the surface, they may look the same. Your average Catholic church that you go to on Sunday and you go to a Lutheran service, on the surface, they may look the same. But are you interested in discovering or knowing the essential differences between the two? And then you can, if she says, yeah, she's interested and expresses interest in knowing that, then you could try and explain to her, Ashley, well, let's take communion, for example, right? So in the Lutheran Church, they believe that Jesus is present there, right? But that the bread is also present there alongside Jesus, right? The particular Lutheran community may very well believe that. That's what Luther taught. That was consubstantiation. And you could say, but sis, that's different than what the Catholic Church believes, namely that bread is no longer there after the words of consecration, but that Jesus' body and blood is present, such that we actually worship the Eucharist, right? And you could pose that question to your sister, Ashley, and say, let me ask you something. You believe Jesus is in the Eucharist? Yeah. Do you worship the Eucharist? Because your community professes that bread is still there. So are you worshiping bread? And notice how that's different, Ashley, than the Catholic Church which says, after the words of consecration, bread's not there anymore. It substantially changed into Jesus' real body and blood. And because it's Jesus' body and blood, we worship the Eucharist because we're worshiping Jesus. Is that what you believe? And you might discover, well, maybe, no, I don't worship the Eucharist. And so there's an essential difference. And then you can say, well, wouldn't you like to have the reality of Jesus' body and blood present in the Eucharist and to receive him in Holy Communion? Because in the Catholic Church, we have that reality because we have valid priests who have been ordained by valid bishops. But in the Lutheran Church, they don't have that valid succession all the way back to the apostles. And so their ministers don't have the power to change bread and wine into Jesus' body and blood. And you could leave it at that and see where the conversation goes. What do you think of that as an initial example, Ashley?
That's a powerful answer. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome.
That is awesome.
That's the only kind of answer Carlo can do, a powerful answer.
I don't know about that, brother.
He's got one speed, powerful. That's it.
Just talk to my boss. He'll tell you.
Ashley, thanks very much. We got to take a quick break. The number 888-318-7884. You can call if you'd like to get in on our conversation about Catholic answers to Protestant questions and leave with a powerful answer like Ashley did. Hey, Jimmy Akin did the beginning apologetics course for the Catholic Answers School of Apologetics, and one by one they're adding more courses to the Catholic Answers School of Apologetics. So the folks around here thought, well, maybe people would like to try taking a class for free before they decide whether they want to sign up for the various classes in the School of Apologetics. So in the whole course that Jimmy did, Beginning Apologetics, they've taken out a free trial lesson. So if you want to get a free trial lesson and see what Jimmy does there in the School of Apologetics and see if the School of Apologetics is for you, just go to catholic.com/free trial and sign up for your introductory lesson. Catholic.com/free trial. And I always hate it when they do the slash because I can never remember what goes after the slash. Just give me a website, but you'll remember it. Don't worry. Catholic.com/free trial.
It's all about the truth. Catholic Answers Live.
I used to wonder if God really cared, why it mattered what church I went to, or why I even bothered with faith at all. Then I started praying more often and going to church. What happened? My relationships got stronger, and I felt a peace that I never had before. I realized that God in my life was the difference between occasionally being happy and finding lasting joy. If you're looking for something more, check out CatholicsComeHome.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
We have a big problem. Our culture is dying, and souls are in danger of being lost. The answer is conversion to Jesus Christ in His church. St. Paul Street Evangelization is a Catholic organization, and we have hundreds of teams spreading the good news throughout the country. But we need your help. The harvest is great, but the laborers are few. Find out more and get involved today at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Carlo Broussard, our guest. Carlo, the author of Prepare the Way, Overcoming Obstacles to God, the Gospel, and the Church, and also his latest book, which is called Meeting the Protestant Challenge. And it doesn't have to be a challenge today. It can just be a question, a curiosity. But if it is a challenge, that's all right as well. If you're a Protestant person, for example, who'd like to challenge a Catholic belief, that's fine. Or maybe you're a Catholic who has faced a challenging question and you'd like some help with. 888-318-7884. Up next is Omar in Cincinnati, Ohio, watching on Facebook Live. Hi, Omar.
Hi, Sai. How are you?
Very well.
Hi, Carlo.
Hey.
I've called a while back, and I have a follow-up question on a couple things. So, intercession of saints. My question is, intercession of saints, is it necessary? I know Catholics quote the cloud of witnesses in Hebrews 12, and that's my second question would be, it's very much a follow-up. The saints in Ephesus, when they say in Ephesians 1:1, saints in Ephesus, what is the definition of saints? Are they the believers who passed away, the saints who are in heaven, or the believers? So what is the definition of saints according to the Catholic Church and the Bible, Ephesians 1:1? And if intercession of saints, praying to saints, or asking their intercession is necessary. These are my questions. Thanks.
Okay. All right, Omar, thank you so much, brother, for those two questions. Let's address the latter question first, and that was, what is the definition of the term saint? So the term saint is used in Catholic teaching in a variety of ways. So saint just simply means the Holy One, right? One separated unto the Lord. Now, that label of saint can technically be applied to anyone who is a validly baptized member of the mystical body of Christ, a member of the mystical body of Christ, whether that member is a member here on earth, in purgatory, or in heaven. So the term saint, generally speaking, simply can refer to Christians, and this is how it's being used in Ephesians. It's used in this way the majority of the time within Scripture. The term saint is used with regard to Christians, those separated into the Lord through baptism. However, Omar, the term saint is used in reference to those Christians in heaven. In Colossians chapter 1, verse 12, St. Paul writes, giving thanks to the Father who has qualified us, that would be the saints here on earth, right? Christians on earth, who has qualified us to share in the inheritance of the saints in light. So there you have saints being referred to Christians in heaven. Okay. Now, of course, in Catholic practice, we reserve the title saint as an honorific title for those that the Pope has officially canonized that we know are in heaven. And that's a legitimate thing to do because it calls to mind that they have achieved a goal that we're ordered to and we're living our lives for. And it serves as a reminder for us that we need to keep striving to achieve that goal because they've achieved perfection, whereas we're still the church militant, struggling against sin. And I articulate other reasons in my book, Meeting the Protestant Challenge. I deal with this particular question in one of the challenges. Now, with regard to whether it is necessary to invoke the saints to pray for us, this is a little bit of a tricky question because we have to nuance it a little bit. If the question is, must we acknowledge that the saints intercede for us, and that it is a good and holy pious practice to request their prayers, then we must say yes. That is a part of definitive church teaching. It's a part of our faith. They were members of the mystical body of Christ, interceding for us out of charity, and it is appropriate and good for us to request their prayers, which is an act of honor, act of veneration, not worship and adoration that reserves to God alone, but an act of honor nevertheless, okay? Now, if the question is, must I necessarily have a devotion to a particular saint, right? And must I, in private devotion, ask the saints to pray for me? Well, that's where we don't have to give a definitive answer to the yes, because in private devotions, sometimes we struggle with that. If a person is coming from a Protestant background, they say, okay, the intercession of the saints is real. I acknowledge we can ask their prayers. That's good and holy, but I'm just still having a hard time doing it emotionally, right? And psychologically and on a subjective level. Well, if that's the case, Omar, then the person is not going to be held accountable, right? God's going to work with that individual given the circumstances that he's in. And that individual Catholic in no way would be considered a bad Catholic because that particular Catholic in no way is denying anything that the church definitively teaches, nor is he or she denying something that the church teaches on the ordinary level, right? Ordinary magisterium. So notice, Omar, how we have to make these distinctions between what we must do and what we're permitted to struggle with if we struggle with it, right? And God's not going to hold us accountable for that. Of course, for some reason, maybe there's some sin that's serving as an impediment that's prohibiting me to have an affection and a devotion to the saints in heaven. And if so, then I would be held accountable for that sin, right? But just generally speaking, hey, if you're having a hard time asking a particular saint to pray for you or the saints in general, and you're working through that, then, your conscience can be at ease and you can rest assured and ask God for the grace to eventually come to a point to where you feel comfortable doing it and to help you overcome those lack of feelings, right? Because that's an obstacle. And to, if God willing, give you some emotional consolation in it.
Thanks, Omar. We go now to Tanya in Vermont watching on YouTube Live. Tanya, your question for Carla.
Thank you so much for taking my question. I have a sister that has 2 children with a Protestant man currently, but they aren't married and he's divorced. he does want to marry her. She wants to get married in the Catholic Church, but at the same time, he doesn't want to annul his marriage with his first wife, whom he has children with also, because he sees it as making them illegitimate if his first marriage is indeed annulled, which is to say the marriage never was. What advice, guidance, or route can I give her in her dilemma?
Right. Well, you can simply say the annulment has no effect on at all on the legitimacy of children, right? Because the annulment is concerned only with the spouses and not the children. Because when this individual had children with, I think, with his prior wife, right, that was in good faith. Like, perhaps in reality, objectively speaking, they weren't husband and wife, but when they engaged in the conjugal act in order to have children, it was on the assumption that they were legally, but not only legally, but validly married. And so consequently, in no way would their children be considered illegitimate. So just because a union is judged to be invalid and never was to begin with, it doesn't follow from that the children are illegitimate. So we can simply challenge the assumption, right? And just deny the assumption and say, no, it has no effect upon the children. It was in good faith whenever the children were conceived. It wasn't like you were just going around engaging in sexual intercourse and a child happened to be conceived out of wedlock, right? That would be a different scenario than the scenario in this case.
What do you think, Tanya?
Thank you so much. I appreciate your thank you just so much.
Okay, Tanya.
Well, it was a pleasure talking with you, Tanya. Thank you very, very much.
Amen.
I think she was talking to me. I don't know. Maybe she was
brother,
talking to you.
it's a team
It's
effort.
a team effort,
here.
right?
Amen to that.
I just push the buttons. Kathy, it's South Dakota, listening on Real Presence Radio. You're up next. Your question for Carlo.
Hi, Carlo. I just love listening to Catholic Answers every day.
Awesome. Me too. I love listening to it as well.
I'm a Catholic educator.
Okay.
I'm married to a non-Catholic, and I've been involved in religious education for about 25 years.
God bless you.
I know. God bless you.
A lot of our kids are not staying Catholic. They're not staying with the church.
Right.
And so my question is, is there a better way to evangelize our kids? We focus on catechesis, but not evangelization. We sacramentalize our kids, as Father John Ricardo says, but we don't evangelize them.
Yeah. All right, Kathy. Well, this is the $1 million question, right? And I don't know, to be honest with you, if there's the $1 million silver bullet answer, because every child is different. But generally speaking, you are right, Kathy, that our religious formation must not only include catechetical formation, like formation within Christian doctrine, but it must also include evangelization, by which we are trying to lead the children to encounter the risen Lord within their lives, to where the faith is seen as not just some compartmentalized thing that you do for 1 hour once a week in Sunday school, right? But that the faith is something that permeates every aspect of your life, right? And this is something that has to be a part of that religious formation, to where they see that, belief in Jesus is going to determine which movies you watch. Belief in Jesus is going to determine the type of person you choose to marry, or the type of the group of people you want to hang out with at school, right? Belief in Jesus is going to determine the type of clothes that you wear, and the virtue of modesty and chastity, etc. And then also too, Kathy, I think it's important that we help children not only to go through the motions and learn the motions of the rituals, which is important, but also to expose the children to the realities that the rituals point to, so that they can encounter those realities and to encounter the risen Jesus personally and even on an emotional level, right? within the divine liturgy and outside of the divine liturgy, right? So all of that has to come into play, and I think all of that is under the umbrella of evangelization.
Kathy, thank you so much. What a great question to end on. Carlo Broussard, thank you very much.
Hey, thank you,
Always enjoyed the hour.
Amen, brother.
You can get Carlo's books over at shop.catholic.com, including his most recent book, Meeting the Protestant Challenge. Tomorrow we've got 2 hours of open forum with Tim Staples and Jim Blackburn, so that'll be a lot of fun. I promise it'll be a lot of fun. Come on by. We'd love to take a call from you as well. We'll see you then, God willing, right here on Catholic Answers Live.